we've been talking about the foul situation in the NBA. You, I think, did multiple opening segments about this new era we were in with the NBA, with guys diving into people, lurching into people. You started getting a ton of feedback. I was getting feedback vicariously just because we do podcasts together and I had people reaching out. We were in threads with multiple people. And then over the All-Star break, something crazy happens. They actually change how they're officiating the games. And we're all watching it and we're going, is this different? I went to 2 Laker games. I think I talked about it in a previous pod. I'm like, man, this is really physical. Like I'm surprised. The Lakers Nuggets game I went to, 17 free throws total. Just in general, something has shifted. Ethan Sherwood Strauss, our friend, wrote about it for his Substack yesterday too. But you noticed right away, right? When were you like, oh my God, they're actually changing this?
Just, I would say, different freedom of movement plays where, like sometimes when you're looking for it, you find it, right? So as soon as I started thinking I was noticing it, then I felt like I was noticing it even more because I was looking for it. But there's just certain plays that, we can get into which ones you like or don't like and some of the numbers that Ethan shared. But like even today with the Clippers, like Norm Powell hooks a defensive player's arm. Now he exaggerated it pretty bad, but then he got called for the foul. And I was like, wait, okay, that's a little different. There was a play last night with Durant going up against Jaylen Brown where I couldn't believe Jaylen Brown wasn't called for a foul. Durant hits the bucket because he was incredible.
I can't wait to talk about that second half. Durant was getting mauled.
Right. And
he had 45 points, but it felt under the old rules, I think he would have had 60 because they would have called every single foul.
So the single play that led me to lose my mind in a couple pods was just the drive where the offensive player is parallel to the paint. They're not even veering towards the rim. And you're staying parallel with them as the defensive player, and then they veer into you at the last second, and then they kind of haul it up. I mean, really, Trae Young has done it a million times. So
well, it's like if you're on a highway and the car in the middle lane just veers into your lane, and then they're doing the police report, and it's like, whose fault was it? And it was like, the guy on the left, the guy who was just going straight forward. It's his fault.
Right.
He's 100% to blame. Is he?
So I don't know. I don't know if this is, the numbers bear it out. Like pre-All-Star game, teams are averaging 115.7 points per game. Post-All-Star game, it's 111.7. Free throws are down from almost 23 attempts to 20 attempts. But pre-All-Star, we're also talking.
Well, and the offensive ratings are down too.
Well,
we had a bunch of people that were up that I think now there's still like a top 6 or 7, but then it's a pretty dramatic drop after that.
But you're also looking at 53 to 55 games pre-All-Star, like 8 to 11 games, depending on the time that this podcast released today. So, yes, I am noticing it, but there are other times where I'm like, man, it just looks like the defender's being more, he's just being allowed to be more physical, cutting off the driving path. That's the thing I'm noticing more. And it doesn't necessarily mean like foul, non-foul. It's just, oh, wow, like they collided there a little bit and they just let him keep playing. And by the way, I'm all for it.
Well, there was another thing going on too. The sharps picked it up immediately and were betting the unders, and the unders were hitting pretty huge before Vegas realized what was going on. I think started adjusting. But I have so many anecdotes from just watching basketball in person and then on TV. But the big play that jumps out to me the most is the end of that Celtics Cavs game when he had that last possession and he dribbled up and Garland arm bars him and elbows him, and it was all stuff just that nobody was getting away with. It was just
you think
physical.
You think that was a bad overturn?
No. Oh, no, not the foul itself. I'm talking about the way he was defending him before Tatum even shot the shot. What's changed now is when guys are trying to...
The little player in that matchup physically is going to be allowed to do whatever he wants all the time.
Yeah, anyway. Fair.
So,
but I noticed
Tatum
that.
Initiated, but go ahead.
Well, he did. But I noticed that. I noticed the game I went to, the Denver Lakers game, Jokic, when he was doing his kind of back down whirly burly thing, and the Lakers were just kind of clubbing him and they were just letting it go. I mean, they didn't even get to 10 free throws in that game. And then last night, the Suns Celtics, it made me start wondering, what is this change going to do better or worse for the Celtics? Because defensively, especially Holiday and White now can ratchet it up a level. But on the other end, I thought it was way harder for Tatum and Brown to kind of get to their spots. And they played really well last night. But I was watching it going, man, if they were calling fouls like they normally did, I actually think the Celtics would be winning this game by 20. It was just a lot of work to get the shots that they wanted. And when that gets to the playoffs, the reason I think this is so important is like, who wins from this? Who wins from this change? And it's like, guess who wins? The fucking Heat, the Jason Voorhees of the NBA. They're going to take advantage of this the most, and this is going to benefit them the best. I think the Celtics with the guards, that's going to really help them. And I think Minnesota would be the other team that if this is going to be more physical, Minnesota's going to be, even with or without Towns, Minnesota is going to be really hard to score against if Edwards and McDaniels at the top of the key are allowed to get a little more handsy with Gobert behind them.
Yeah, I think that's a really good call, especially McDaniels, because he lives in foul trouble and he's so aggressive. Now, I know Minnesota fans aren't thrilled with the way the officiating ended the other night, and maybe we'll get to that Cleveland game, but I don't think too many Minnesota fans were complaining about the officiating against the Pacers the night previous to that. The Anthony Edwards welcoming party to the rest of the world. But McDaniels also had 2 really stupid fouls. So the foul on Garland at the end of the shot clock when he reaches back across into him is just like the shot clock's about to expire. Like you have to be smarter than that in those spots. But now if you bring it out big picture, because I started thinking about it too this morning, just going, all right, wait, if this is real, which I still think we need to see more than 9 to 10 games of like, okay, everything's different now. The league is different.
Yeah, it's 2.5 weeks now, right?
Yeah. I just know that whenever that feels like something becomes a priority, the tendency seems to be kind of default back to like what you're comfortable with. And I don't know if this happened. Like I don't think the league's going to admit it. And then I also thought it was kind of funny that once it's happened, then the complaint becomes from the teams, some teams, depending on which side of this argument they're on, of like, wait, you're just going to do this in the middle of the season? And I read that stuff and I'm like, yeah, fucking right. Because it sucked before. So what's your solution? Hey, this thing that keeps happening that sucks, that puts defensive players in a helpless situation. They have like literally no options on drives. Your idea is just ride it out for the next few months and then maybe we'll get to it this summer.
We'll change it in July.
Yeah. Like be happy if the league did in fact do this, that the league was like, hey, enough of this. I also wonder like how much of just the All-Star weekend, which, I don't have any time for. It's not for me. I don't care. I think complaining about it is probably more pointless because it's almost like people forget. It takes 12 months and then they forget how bad it was the year before. Yeah. Like this year was not the first year that this isn't fun to watch. But, whether it was just this point of frustration, I don't know if any of the things are combined with it. But you're right. Like which teams, which players do you go, wait a minute, this actually now maybe ticks it their way a couple points in advantage because of how physical they can be, especially with the perimeter stuff, because some of the teams, it looked like they felt helpless on the perimeter. It was just nothing you could ever do.
I wonder, I don't think this is a top 3 reason they did it, but it might be in the top 5. Knowing that the Olympics are coming for the NBA and for a lot of the best players in the league that are going to be playing for different countries and how drastically different those games are officiated than what we're watching over here. Like, especially if the goal of the NBA is like, man, it'd be nice if Team USA was able to pull off a gold medal. This was not the training ground, this NBA season we have for how to play the FIFA rules, which are completely different flow. Nobody gets a call ever in FIFA. I don't know. I thought I'd flag that too, but the biggest thing for me is who wins from this.
Like, who else do you think wins? Like, who else? Because I think your McDaniels point is a perfect one. Like, that might be the best example.
I think this hurts Denver a tiny bit because Jokic, I felt like, was officiated a tiny bit unfairly to begin with. Is a little bit of Shaq-itis with how the referee's like, well, he's so big. What are we supposed to do? But he does get mauled all the time.
I think he gets his ass kicked all the time. So seeing a game after this,
let it go.
So I don't know if that's necessarily any different in the Lakers game than all the other times. Like, as much as we both love Steve Kerr, I think his frustration after that Denver game when he had a lot of free throws was about some of the stuff, the bigger picture stuff that we're talking about. Yeah. When in reality, like, Jokic isn't the best person to use as the example because in comparison to the other players, like, because he's in the post and because he's working slowly, I think people are allowed to be way more physical with him because it's not out in the open with the ball heading towards the basket.
I think it's bad for the Knicks because especially the Brunson-centric when he comes back, but the Brunson-centric offense they had, tough one. Especially if you're allowed to be really physical against that, I think that could hurt them. Cerruti's Magic, we'll see. Now that they're going to be a 4 seed. Now they're going to have home court in round 1, probably. Now we'll see how it plays out, but it's definitely, I was even watching Durant last night, who's having an incredible offensive year. I mean, his numbers, I wanted to talk about that later, but his numbers at age 35 compared to the other seasons in his career, like the percentages are actually higher. Now, does that have to do with how they're calling the games, the free-flowing play, all that stuff, or is he figured out a way Brady style to actually get better as he's hitting his mid-30s? I don't fully understand it, but he's like a 53, 45, 86 guy percentage-wise. This is the best percentages he's ever had. Even yesterday, there was a point in the Celtic game, and the Celtics played well last night. Like that was about as without Porzingis, that's about as well as they could play. And Durant was like 15 for 20 at one point. Did you see that?
Well, yeah,
it showed his stats.
Every time you're like, all right, Boston's got this, and you're like,
something would happen.
No, they don't.
Yeah.
And look, I was curious to see how they would look after the Cleveland loss. And I think we should probably talk about the Denver loss at some point, or the Denver win.
I want to do that next.
Yeah. All right. But staying on this, though, with the scoring part of it, like in what motivated this stuff, whether it was complaints from teams or, just watching enough in the first half of this season where you went, wait, is this what it is now for offensive players? And you had the Embiid game, you had the Towns game, you had the Booker game in there, and Booker's always good for like one crazy one. The funniest thing I think is like how the Luka one became negative, and I know Mavs fans turned it into somehow that this massive campaign to be against Luka. When I think it's as simple. It was just he was the guy that scored his points after the other guys did. And then it became not so much how great is Luka, but like what the hell is going on in this sport? Right. Because I would tell you that I thought Luka's game's the most impressive out of all of those games, because he could have shot even more if he wanted to against Atlanta, but he was actually making the right reads because they still had to win that game. As bad as Atlanta is defensively, like I don't know what Pop was trying to do to Wembanyama in that Embiid game. Like, we're just never going to bring a double, and we're just going to see. Like
that was weird.
Yeah.
I think Pop had a dinner reservation like 10 minutes after the game that he was trying to get to.
He just that's what was so scary about Embiid's night, is that it was so easy.
Yeah.
Where when I looked at Luka, I went, he still has to make the right basketball play with the way this game is playing out. But because Luka's was after those guys, then I just know, I think you know it as well, how it works when you're at ESPN and it's, okay, what's the topic today for the shows? The topic pivoted from, oh my God, Embiid had 70, like how great is he, to this is the fourth guy to do this in a very short amount of time. Like what the hell's going on?
Yeah.
And, a lot. Look, we've said for a couple years.
The 50s were as bad. It was just 50 used to really mean something when somebody had 50. Like, oh my God, that guy had 50?
50, I know.
And then 50 is just, I feel like, how many guys in the league would you not be surprised by a 50-point game from? At least 30?
Yeah, depend on the circumstance, who else was hurt or whatever, because
like Jaylen Brown can have a 50-point game at this point. I never would have in a million years thought he was going to score 50 points in a game, but it's probably going to happen. Or maybe not now that we have these new rules.
Should we try to come up with how many guys you'd say no to? 50? Bones Highland? Could Bones Highland get 50?
Maybe. The right situation. Playing for a lottery team.
Amir Coffey. I have Clippers. I got Clippers on the mind after that game today. So
every team has two guys who could probably have gotten 50 under these old rules. Do you want to pivot to Boston, Denver? Did we hit this enough? I guess the only other thing
I want to. Well, do you have more on this, or do you want to go to Boston, Denver?
The only thing I would say on this, and then we can move to Boston, Denver, is the amount of private discourse about what was going on with the rules and how mad people on the different teams were versus what was being discussed publicly. I thought there was a pretty big disparity. I really feel like the feeling I got, and I think you felt the same, especially after you started really talking about it and people reached out to you, is that people in the league felt like this was a crisis. Like this was like, if we don't fix this, we might not be able to pull this back. Like this might become what basketball is. And I think people were just like, this sucks. It's a bad product. It's hard to coach. It's making guys who are mediocre players look good, and it's making good players look great. And this is bullshit. And we have to fix this. So I don't know if Adam went to All-Star Weekend and was talking to a bunch of people about it or what happens. He also has Joe Dumars is really important behind the scenes now. And I think, a little like how Theo Epstein was tasked with hey, can you help us fix baseball? Do you have any ideas? And then he really put time and thought and energy into it and studied and came up with changes. I think Dumars has been involved behind the scenes.
I wouldn't be surprised by that. And, I know that there's always like a reminder of when you think people like you, like how often I would take calls from teams to bitch about other media members.
Right.
I know you and I've talked about this. So I've never been delusional enough to think that I haven't been the subject of somebody calling another media member to be like, that Russillo guy sucks. Right.
Yeah.
But having said that, with the understanding, knowing that it likely, almost certainly exists, I didn't get one team to reach out to me to tell me I was wrong. After I did
nobody's like, you're crazy. This is great.
No. And there are people that I think I'm close enough with it. But I'm like, hey, I think you're off base on this, or you're nuts, or here's what you should look at. Or it was across the board. Keep talking about this.
Yeah, totally. That's what made it so interesting. It was like, please, maybe you'll make a difference. It was like, be picketing outside Silver's office. Let's take a break.
Year 2029, just me at the center court, heroes among us.
Right, Russillo. His monologue on a January 15th podcast was the catalyst.